Hey guys, we are back updating the power rankings for Survivor 46 following episode 4. And obviously, this episode was kind of rough, where really it was the same as last week, where it was pretty much the same outcome, just delayed by 1 week. It was largely a foregone conclusion over who was going home. And even from an Edgic perspective, I feel like I still don't entirely know what's happening with this season, where even a lot of the top contenders have holes in their edit at this point, and it's kind of hard to parse out, but we'll do our best here. But there are 15 players to talk about, and as wasting any more time, let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 15, we have the boot from this week, and here we have Bonu. And this was largely to be expected, where it felt like he was very much at the bottom of the Yanu tribe, and he was pretty much being primed to be taken out the next time that they win the tribal, especially with him losing his vote and not even having a shot in the dark. And sure enough, after the Yanus lost the immunity challenge, that's pretty much what happened, where there's literally zero suspense coming to this tribal. They don't even pretend that there is an actual game plan, considering how open and shut that the actual vote was. And it was actually interesting hearing Jeff talk about this episode on the On Fire podcast, where he described this whole post-challenge scene as Bonu going over the 5 stages of grief, where, again, with it being such a foregone conclusion, we see Bonu kind of going these 5 stages of grief, over accepting the fact that he is essentially done in the game. And while I can kind of appreciate the artistic side of that, I think from a pure game standpoint, it was largely underwhelming, especially considering that we were supposed to get this last week. So we literally just wasted 2 episodes on the same stuff, only to get the same outcome that we could have gotten last week. And I feel like it took away from screen time we could have gotten from the other tribes. Now, obviously, we get more screen time from the other tribes in this episode, but the fact that they focus so much on Bonu, both this episode and last episode, again, it kind of got repetitive after a while. And again, from a pure entertainment standpoint, it wasn't really fun to watch seeing Bonu breaking down and the other people on the tribe kind of belittling him and treating him like a baby. So again, I was kind of disappointed by that. But if we are talking about Bonu as a player, he's obviously pretty bad. I mean, he doesn't seem built for the game. He talks about like wanting to be honest and stuff. We have his whole play at the beginning of the episode where he decides to tell Tiffany and Q that he had told the other people on the journey that Kenzie was running their tribe, which is just really dumb and further painted a target on his back. And again, he was such a consensus target by the time he goes home that even the other people on his tribe were telling him to his face that they're voting him out, and there really just was nothing he could do there. Now, I think it'll be definitely interesting to talk about Bonu more on the player ranking at the end of the season, considering he has some pretty interesting competition for the bottom of the player ranking, and obviously we'll get to that soon enough. But obviously, Bonu is now out of the game to where he's here at number 15. And before we continue, I am once again partnering up with Russell Muscle TV to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles and practice them. That way you can potentially be the next challenge beast on Survivor 47 and beyond. In this season, we have creator lockers. These are special bundles handpicked by myself and other Survivor YouTubers, along with creator trading cards. If you purchase my puzzle, you can get your hands on the Labyrinth Ball puzzle, the Slide puzzle, and Spencer's puzzle from Survivor Cambodia. If you want to take home these puzzles and more, feel free to use my link in the description or use my affiliate code, Survivor Gumball, and start prepping now. And with that, there are 14 people left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the game based on their editing current game position. But number 14, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on, is not Liz, but a new person, and here we have Tim Spicer. And this is now the second episode in a row where he got 0 confessionals, which, again, is kind of hard to ignore, especially when Liz has been getting a more consistent presence on the show. Plus, we are seeing Tim pretty much being on the bottom of the tribe, where in this episode, it kind of ends with Jem pinning a lot of the blame for the Beware Advantage situation onto him, which is pretty bad. And the fact that we don't even get his perspective on this whole situation is pretty mind-blowing there. And I feel like if Siga were to go to tribal in this next episode, Tim's probably gone. Though to be fair, I think Siga probably gets to emerge unscathed, considering Jem's like setup from the last episode where she talked about the further instructions if her tribe never loses immunity. But beyond that, I feel like Tim really has nothing going on edit-wise, where we literally saw him getting mostly negative content in the first 2 episodes, only for him to go radio silent in the next 2 episodes. It's not looking good. So because of that, he is here at number 14. Now moving on to number 13, and we have someone who finally got off the bottom, and here we have Liz, who I did decide to bump up simply because this episode wasn't terrible for her. Now, I wouldn't say it's a good episode per se, where she gets a confessional after the reward talking about how she's allergic to a whole bunch of stuff, sort of reinforcing that storyline. And then we also have her talking about how she would want to target Soda because if Soda makes the merge, then she's primed to win, and then we can't have that. So again, Liz got a bit more to do in this episode, and she has been a more consistent presence on the show compared to Tim, but at the end of the day, I still don't think she's winning, which is why she's here at number 13. Now moving on to number 12, and we have someone who I just mentioned, and here we have Soda. And I think Soda's in a lot of danger coming to this next episode. I feel like if Nami goes to Tribal next round, she's probably gone, and considering that we got set up to her being targeted due to her being this big threat, I think it's possible that Nami goes to Tribal next, and she is the next boot, where obviously she gets to talk about how she is obviously playing the game and that she's constantly having game talk. She gets to lay out the power structure, but then the rest of the scene is her being undercut, where we have people like Teevin and Hunter wanting her gone. And I think the Hunter confessional in particular is pretty damning, considering that he talks about her as being his competition to being the closest to Teevin, which is pretty bad there. And considering that Hunter and Teevin was being set up as this important relationship in the premiere, I think it would make a ton of sense for Hunter to succeed in taking out Soda as a way of establishing that relationship and for that relationship to become a bigger part of the season. So there's that. And you even have Liz talking about how she wants Soda gone as well, talking about how she's being this big threat. So in a lot of ways, I am very concerned for Soda in the short term and even in the long term. I think she's got enough negativity at this point, particularly with that confessional from Venus in episode 2 about how she can be a bit selfish, that I can't really see Soda doing too well in the game at this point, to where she's here at number 12. Now moving on to number 11, and we have someone who I have been pretty low on for a lot of the season, and I'm still low on them now, and here we have Q. And again, I feel like this was a mostly bad look for Q, considering that so much of his content up to this point has focused on Bonu, where over the last 2 episodes, we've seen Q trying to coach Bonu up, trying to make him a better player, but now Bonu's gone, and it really makes me wonder where Q's edit is going at this point. I feel like it's a similar issue to what I had with him after the premiere, where I feel like in the premiere, a lot of his content was about Jelinski and how he's annoyed by Jelinski giving up at every opportunity, only for Jelinski to be the first boot. And now we see him latching onto Bonu and focusing on how Bonu's a bad player, and now Bonu's out of the game. So I feel like I don't really know where Q's going at this point, and it feels like his edit doesn't really have much direction to it, where it feels like he's more so reacting to other people than we're seeing of himself. And the stuff we are getting of himself is not great either. Like you have him like feeling bad after losing the challenge and him like considering voting himself out, which is pretty dumb. So I am largely getting mixed signals from Q at this point, and I don't really feel that great about him winning at this point, to where he's here at number 11. Now moving on to number 10, and we have another person from Yanu, and here we have Kenzie. And I've been pretty low on Kenzie the last couple of episodes, and it still holds here, where at this point she feels like a largely negative presence on the show, where a lot of her content is either her complaining about Bonu being this big man-child, or it's her like talking about how Yanu sucks and how they lose every challenge. It just feels very negative for the most part. And considering that we've already gotten like content of her being a big threat and her just like being someone that doesn't feel that primed to win at this point, I'm just not feeling that great about Kenzie. And even if she's not gone in the next couple rounds, I can't really see how she gets towards the end of the game without being seen as this big threat. So it's not looking great at this point, to wherever here at number 10. Now moving on to number 9, and this person has kind of gone up, but not really because I feel like they've gotten better, but because other people have gone down. But we do have Mariah, and Mariah is just there where, again, it feels like she's only being shown absolutely necessary. It feels like she doesn't really have much substance to her content, where really the bulk of her content in this episode is her like talking before the immunity challenge about how she can't jump, and we have that whole segment of her tribe helping her learn to jump for the immunity challenge, which is just pretty silly there. She does also get a confessional, like setting up the fact that the Beware advantage is not where it seems, and how Jeff will never give you something impossible, and that Jeff will never lie to you, even though he did in 41, but whatever. So again, I feel like Mariah is just kind of being thrown in whenever necessary. It feels like we're not really getting much from her, outside of that one confessional she got in the premiere about how she wants to have friends. So really, I'm not feeling that great about Mariah either, which is why she's here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have another person who I'm kind of middling on at this point, and here we have Ben. And Ben is kind of like Mariah as well, where it feels like he's only being shown like wherever, where we see him cheering up the tribe after losing the reward challenge, and we literally see him like helping Mariah learn the jump. And in general, he kind of just seems like this personification of the Siga tribe, which is being presented as his kumbaya tribe, like live and let live tribe. So again, there's that at least, but I feel like a lot of his content just feels circumstantial and that they're just throwing it in because he's just this fun character or whatever. It doesn't really feel like he's being propped up to win. So because of that, I do have him here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and I wasn't entirely sure what to do with this person, considering they got literally no content this week. But at the same time, I still think there's potential for them to become a bigger character. And here we have Venus. And obviously, Venus got no confessionals in this episode, which did feel pretty weird considering that just last episode, Randon got pulled from the game. And it felt like this was going to be the big turning point for her in her story, where at that point, like she would start to avenge Randon, start to become a bigger player in the game, only for her to not really weigh in at all. Now, granted, there's not really much for her to say at this point, considering that her tribe doesn't go to tribal and considering that so much of the focus was on the Yanu tribe in this episode. But at the same time, there's definitely setup for her to get her way, particularly with the target starting to shift onto Soda. So she could get some legs in the game. She could get some content talking about Soda in the next episode, particularly that ends up becoming the Soda boot episode. So I think there's definitely room for her to maneuver here. But I still have those same fundamental complaints that I had with her before, that I feel like she's largely being set up as this journey edit that's not really going to lead to a win, but she could become a major character down the road, which is why I still have her this high at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we actually have the same top 6 that we did last week, it's just a matter of ordering them. However, I think this episode really muddied the waters to where each of these people have flaws in their edit at this point, and it's kind of hard to parse out. It's kind of hard to figure out where exactly the season is going, but I'm going to do my best here. But number 6, we do have Charlie, and I think this was kind of a bad episode for Charlie, considering that most of his content was circumstantial. He talks about the Beware advantage, talks about how dumb it was for Mariah to share with the rest of the tribe, that she was too excited there. And in general, like a lot of his content there just kind of felt surface level, doesn't really bring much there. And considering that his previous episode wasn't the best either, I did have to drop him here. But again, considering how in flux this top 6 are, I could see him coming back next week, but for the time being, I do have to leave him here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and this person's kind of here by default, even though I don't really feel the best about them at this point, but we do have Tiffany. And again, I think Tiffany is the clear frontrunner on the Yanu side, but even within that, I still don't feel that great about Tiffany actually winning the game. I think she's someone who is built to have a long longevity on the season, and that's largely what's elevating her on this list. But really beyond that, I feel like there isn't really enough there to justify a win, not really much of a storyline that could carry a win, and considering how overexposed Yanu has been, and considering how much they seem to be undermined, I can't really have her any higher than number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and we probably have the most perplexing person to talk about up to this point, but we do have Gem. And in general, I've kind of been confused over where to have Gem here, considering on one hand, I feel like a lot of her content is somewhat lacking, where she's been a bit too quiet for my liking, and we don't really have a lot of personal content from her up to this point. And even in this episode, you have her whole plan of replanting the Beware advantage that she had found to cause this chaos and confusion. And from a pure gain standpoint, this whole move feels kind of pointless and could blow up in her face, especially if people start to investigate it a bit more and start to realize that maybe Tim wasn't behind it. And in general, I don't really see the upside to her causing all this chaos there. But on the other hand, I don't feel like the episode is presenting it as being a negative thing, where we get her perspective about how like she wants to have fun and that that's a big part of the game, and the show like presents this as this positive attribute. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's that bad of an episode for her, and mixing that with her not being too overexposed and her having this big winner quote in episode 1, I think there's definitely things you can praise about Gem, and there's definitely reason to have her as a contender here. But I feel like there's just enough doubt with the rest of her edit, then also the possibility that she could get caught anyway in the following episode, that leaves her here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and I sadly had to drop this person from last week, but we do have Mariah. And Mariah had an interesting episode here. She does get her intro package after losing the reward challenge, talking about being an immigrant and how she pushes herself to succeed and how she's hard on herself whenever she screws up. And on paper, this is pretty good considering that it is personal content. But on the other hand, the rest of the episode isn't great either, where she ends up finding the Beware advantage and she throws it away at first before ends up picking it up. I feel like they didn't need to show that. You later have her believing Jem saying that Tim was the one to plant it, sort of falling into her trap there, which isn't great. And you also have Charlie calling her out for getting too excited and how they could have shared this Beware advantage as a secret, but instead let the whole tribe know about it. So, again, I'm not too sure what to make of Maria at this point. I feel like this was mostly a bad episode for her. Now, at the end of the day, she is still a contender considering the content that she had gotten early on this season, and really compared to the rest of the field, I think she definitely has plenty of highs as well. But this was definitely a bad look for her to where I had to drop her to number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and I had a serious debate for having this person at number 1, if I'm being honest. But after thinking about it, I did decide to leave Teevin here at number 2. And I think Teevin is actually in a pretty interesting spot at this point, edit wise. Where last week he did have a cooldown episode, which isn't that bad, all things considered. But then he comes right back in this episode, getting some strong personal content, getting his intro package about his dad and how he never got to spend more time with him, and how he's glad that he can now impart his wisdom onto his tribe by cooking the fish. And again, that's all pretty good there. And he also gets some setup to some game talks where he talks about wanting to take out Soda, which is all pretty good there. I think we are starting to get inklings of Teevin rising as his major character on the season. And to be fair, we did see that coming as well, considering his premiere. But obviously, after the last couple of episodes focused a lot on Yanu, I think we are going to start to get more focus on Teevin moving forward, which is all pretty good. And I'm actually feeling pretty high on him at this point, considering that he does seem to be one of the lesser flawed people edit wise. Where I feel like the people we already talked about have more things you can poke at with their edits. But at the same time, I am also questioning it a lot, considering how perfect his edit seems to be at this point. So I am definitely questioning where this season is truly going at this point. But considering that Teevin is probably the person I had the least complaints about edit-wise, where while he did get a bit of negativity in episode 2, I feel like beyond that, I don't really have much to complain about with Teevin edit-wise. It's just a question of whether they're going to allow this style of edit to win on this season, considering just how flawed everyone else seems to be at this point, which is why I have him here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 46 at this point is Hunter. Now, I actually have more complaints with Hunter's edit up to this point compared to Teevin, where he did get some negativity in episode 2 with him wanting to find the idol, only for him to not get it. You also have episode 3, where he talks about how everyone's underestimating him and how he wants to play into people's perceptions of him, only for Venus to see right through him. So, again, I feel like those are pretty bad signs for him. And beyond that, he actually has one of the lowest confessional counts on the cast up to this point, which is kind of surprising considering how much of a presence he seems to be on the show, but still that's something worth mentioning. So again, there are definitely some worry signs for Hunter from an edit perspective, but at the same time, I do think this was a solid episode for him where he is involved in the game talks to target Soda. He gets a confessional about how Soda is his biggest competition to being close to Teevin, where considering that seemed to be an important relationship set up in the premiere, I can very well see this being set up to Hunter and Teevin taking out Soda and making that the main relationship moving forward. And considering the amount of content that Yanu has gotten, I don't really blame the season for not having focused on him more up to this point. So I am actually feeling alright about Hunter at this point. Now yes, there's still plenty of warning signs. Yes, I could see this entire top section of the list being open to shifting around, but I feel like at this point, considering where we are in the season, considering the amount of holes that a lot of top contenders have, I feel like this entire top section of list is very much open to debate, and even with Hunter, I have my reservations. But considering Hunter's close relationship to Teevin, who up to this point has gotten a relatively clean edit, I think Hunter stands to benefit quite a bit from that relationship, and I feel like despite his flaws, I think there's still enough upside for Hunter at this point to where I have him here at number 1. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps with the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the Power Rankings again, so you can look forward to that. I'm covering other shows right now, such as The Amazing Race 36 and Big Brother Canada 12, so you can expect weekly Power Rankings of those shows. I'm on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description. And you can join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.